Livestock are blamed for serious environmental impacts at a global level. The media and the general public are often not aware that the worst impacts are being attributed to grazing livestock, and that mitigation measures usually involve abandoning pastoral systems. However, this conflicts with the fact that grazing livestock have existed throughout written history, and conflicts with the evidence that environmental impacts have accelerated since the Industrial Revolution. Here, we will take a closer look at the existing interpretations and arguments about grazing livestock related to biodiversity, soil carbon and albedo, competition for land, use of water, and greenhouse gas emissions. Biodiversity. Mega-herbivores could be found on all continents, roaming in constant search for new pastures. Wild herbivores have similar effects on landscapes as transhumant or rotationally grazing livestock do. Contrary to the current dominant narrative, natural and highly biodiverse landscapes were complex, with trees, shrubs, and lots of grass. When mega-herbivores disappeared, hunter-gatherers and later livestock keepers kept landscapes open, preventing the extinction of many plants that do not tolerate shade and need to grow in the sun. The loss of pasture and the abandonment of livestock mobility explain part of the current pollinator crisis in Europe. If domestic herbivores rotate and do not graze continuously, they leave many flowers uneaten, which feed major populations of pollinators. Later, when those herbivores eat those same plants, but with seeds, they disperse thousands of seeds per day. Both processes maintain healthy levels of genetic exchange in plants and prevent inbreeding. On the other hand, grazing livestock have been able to coexist for millennia with large wildlife in Africa. Only in recent decades have poverty and inequality, illegal trafficking of protected species, and habitat fragmentation pushed many wild species to the brink of extinction. Soil carbon and albedo. We now know that ecosystems are in dynamic equilibrium, subject to periodic disturbances through either herbivory or fire or both, that open up forests and achieve high levels of biodiversity. The resulting natural landscapes are dominated by savannas, parklands, and other complex landscapes, with trees, shrubs, and much grass. In designing strategies to combat climate change, reforestation is put forward as the most powerful weapon. But trees store most of the carbon in their trunks, leaves, and branches, parts that are very sensitive to fire. Reforesting at the expense of grasslands has proven not to be a good idea. Even when compared to spontaneous forests, grasslands can also store a lot of carbon, with the advantage that it is stored in the soil in more stable forms, as almost all of it is underground. The disappearance of herbivores leads to shrub encroachment in open ecosystems. In snow-covered areas, the amount of solar radiation that is absorbed can increase particularly strongly. This is called loss of albedo. The landscape becomes darker when covered by trees, and the snow cover between them thickens in winter because there are no herbivores to trample or dig through it. This thick layer of thick snow insulates the ground from the severe winter cold. The permafrost then does not become cold enough to withstand the summer heat, and may release huge amounts of methane as it melts. This would greatly exacerbate climate change, especially if it ends up triggering the release of methane trapped in the Arctic permafrost. Competition for land use. International statistics show that livestock graze up to 70% of agricultural land. And this is often interpreted as a use that competes with plant-based food. However, most extensive livestock grazing takes place on land that is not cultivated. Moreover, when it uses arable land, it usually does not compete with crops, because in summer the animals are in the mountains, and in winter they eat crop residues that are not really fit for human consumption. Livestock also organically fertilize the soil for the next crop. The same logic applies in tropical systems, where drier areas are grazed during the wet season, while crop residues in more humid areas are grazed during the dry season. If livestock would disappear, cropping would have to be extended widely across the landscape to obtain the food that the livestock used to produce. This would lead to transforming land that had previously been grazed, much like wild herbivores would have grazed it. Use of synthetic fertilizer would also increase, which in turn generates more fossil CO2 and can pollute water. Use of water. It is claimed that a huge amount of water is needed to produce a kilogram of beef or lamb. But this omits the fact that not all water use has the same environmental impact on the resource water. Rainwater, called green water, is not the same as water from rivers and lakes, called blue water, which is a limited and valuable water resource. Nor is it the same as the water that is contaminated when producing food or goods, and then discharged into rivers and lakes, polluting them, so-called gray water. The aggregate water footprint also assumes that water is of equal importance in humid sites as it is in arid sites. In other words, it does not allow us to understand whether there are water uses that compete with human consumption. It is not the same to produce a kilogram of food, be it meat or crops, in an oceanic climate with constant rainfall as it is in an arid area. Grass-fed herds use very little water from streams, remember, hardly any blue water, and cause very little discharge of gray water. Most of their water footprint consists of rainwater, so their environmental impact on water is very similar to that of wild herbivores. Producing any other food on a large scale usually has a smaller rainwater footprint than producing ruminant meat, but it uses a similar amount of river water. In addition, it causes higher water pollution because of the chemical fertilizers used in its production, increasing its gray water impact. In very extensive production systems, such as transhumance, we know that blue water consumption and gray water production are reduced to a minimum. Greenhouse gas emissions. When livestock are said to be responsible for 14.5% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, the natural baseline level is not taken into account. Methane, which bears most of the climate blame for ruminants, is a short-lived gas in the atmosphere whose role in global warming is further exaggerated by current accounting metrics. Methane from ruminants is part of the natural carbon cycle. When a ruminant eats grass and belches methane, this gas remains in the atmosphere for about 10 years, trapping much more heat than CO2 in the atmosphere. After this period, the methane becomes biogenic, climate-neutral CO2, which is fixed by plants through photosynthesis, thus closing the natural carbon cycle. Methane emitted by ruminants does not add any additional carbon to the atmosphere, but it does trap lots of heat in the first 10 years, so it is very important to reduce it. The true climate impact of biogenic methane produced by herbivores, whether livestock or wild, is neutralized after about 10 years. Meanwhile, CO2 from fossil fuels releases new carbon into the atmosphere, and this CO2 remains trapped for hundreds or even thousands of years, overloading the natural carbon cycle and causing much of the current warming of our planet. According to the 6th report of the IPCC, it is clear that the warming in recent decades is due mainly to CO2 emissions and not so much to methane or other greenhouse gases. Conceptually, methane in the atmosphere is like water in a bathtub with a very large drain. It accumulates in the atmosphere only if we increase methane emissions. This is currently happening, but it is not known if this is due to increased emissions from wetlands, melting permafrost, the production of more fossil gas, increased emissions from landfills, or agricultural intensification. According to a recent study, the high growth rate of methane in 2020 may be explained by a drop in atmospheric sinks of methane and more wetland emissions. The CO2 bathtub has a much smaller drain. That's why CO2 is overflowing the bathtub and will not stop rising until our fossil CO2 emissions are close to zero. One of the options proposed to stabilize the climate is to reduce methane. But if we remove grazing ruminants, or mowed pastures to feed them, their ecological niche would be partly filled by wild herbivores, which, together with the more frequent fires, could emit a large amount of methane, with a significant impact on the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Grazing, given its similarities to natural herbivory, is a very important part of natural ecosystem processes. The productive potential of extensive livestock farming is said to be very limited, because the natural herbivore populations are much smaller than the current biomass of livestock. But new research suggests that the potential number of herbivores that fit into ecosystems, whether domestic or wild, is much higher. This would imply a decisive role for pastoralism in meeting many of our nutritional needs. We can openly argue that sustainable livestock farming is not so much part of the problem as it is part of the solution.